Hi, my name is Miriam Neptune. I'm here from Barnard College. We are here for the last session of the Undesign the Redline Symposium. And it's going to be introduced by my colleague, Cami Jones, who's the Executive Director of Community Engagement and Inclusion at Barnard. Stay on at the end so you can hear more about how to connect with us and stay involved in our future programming.
Hey, I'll get started then. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Miriam, for the introduction and welcome to the final session for Undesign the Redline. As Miriam said, my name is Cami Jones. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm so excited and ecstatic to introduce our wonderful panel this afternoon under one roof. And what a unique roof, as we are virtually coming together to discuss the beauty and value of community engagement, which is sustained, mutually reciprocal, and inclusive. As I mentioned, I have the honor of serving as the inaugural ED of Community Engagement, which is an office charged with fostering an ecosystem of civic and community engagement at Barnard, but also really leaning into the importance of connecting and working alongside community leaders and stakeholders across Harlem and the city through innovative, inclusive, authentic, and lasting opportunities. Our office seeks to inspire civic participation, and we are committed to tackling critical social justice issues locally, nationally, and globally. As an office, we have had the pleasure of working with several subcommittees in CB9 as well as CB10. Hi, Victor. Piloting a STEAM in the City program for local K-8 teachers in Harlem, launching community action and policy programs, and collaborating with We Act. I know Peggy isn't here, but she kicked off everything yesterday. And furthermore, we've had the pleasure of working within a community that's filled with resilience, empowerment, and strength. Today, you have the pleasure of hearing from panelists who are Harlem residents, sharing about the community changes related to gentrification, affordable housing, and the preservation of Harlem's cultural legacies, which is in alignment with the purpose and focus of this wonderful project that we're all here for today, which is amplifying key social justice issues. Furthermore, as the title hints, we are doing this under one roof. We're joining like-minded individuals and souls who want to do more and explore what we can do to not only support this project, and the community challenges, but to be sustained and really lean into the important work around gentrification and affordable housing. With that being said, I would like to quickly introduce you to our moderator and panelists for this afternoon. First, we'll start with an alum, Brianna Starkey, who's our moderator and just a fabulous individual to work with. Brianna is a paralegal at NYCLU and graduated cum laude from Barnard in 2020 with a dual degree in sociology and human rights. Previously, Brianna worked as a litigation paralegal, and she worked closely with general counsel partners and senior associates to provide litigation support for one of the firm's top antitrust cases and did a lot of pro bono work. Brianna continues to pursue her passion for social justice and community service by collaborating with several nonprofit organizations in New York City and Chicago to address the affordable housing crisis. So welcome our moderator. Next, we have Monica Dula. Monica is a native of Wilkesboro, North Carolina. Monica was raised in New York City and is a graduate of Manhattan College. She went on to study law at Teatro College, and after graduating from Teatro, she started her dream career at the Legal Aid Society Criminal Defense Division in the Bronx, where she represents her community in all aspects of a criminal matter. She has been able to serve her community as a member of Community Board 9 in Manhattan, and she also serves as the Vice President of Membership and Chair of the Women Lawyers Division for the National Bar Association. We next have Victor Edwards. Victor has been a resident of West Harlem for the past 40 years. He was educated at SUNY New Paltz, Hay Hudson Valley, and completed his graduate degree at Fordham University in New York City. Previously, Victor was employed with the New York City Board of Education as a guidance counselor. Following his work with the New York City Board of Education, he began a career in public housing, working with NYCHA for over 30 years. Victor is currently retired, but he is very busy. I know this personally. He works as a volunteer for the Habitat for Humanity and Community Board 9. He holds several positions as first and second vice chair. For the last 6 years, Victor has chaired the board's strategic planning committee. During the past 2 years, he has focused primarily on the impact of incarceration and recidivism on the West Harlem community. We next have Michael Palma. He is a lifelong and second-generation resident of Hamilton Heights, Harlem. Mr. Palma has been a community activist all his adult life. He divides his time between working in theater and photography, as well as being an advocate for a better quality of life in West Harlem. He has twice graduated from Columbia, and as a community activist, he focuses on increasing West Harlem's quality of life around affordable housing. Along with all the community volunteer opportunities that he is involved in, he's a leader of the Montefiore Park Neighborhood Association and is one of the founding members of the HDFC Coalition. Additionally, he joined Broadway Housing as the director of housing, and he's an active Community Board 9 Manhattan member as well for the past 17 years. He has served on both the Housing and Arts and Culture committees, and he is currently the executive director of Teatro Círculo. So very busy and very involved in this community. We also have Karen Taylor. And Karen is the founder and executive director of While We Are Still Here, a not-for-profit heritage preservation organization. She is driven by her passion to bring cultural history of Harlem to the forefront of now and to keep it relevant for generations to come. Inspired by the discussion of gentrification, she has moved to steward this creation of programming that wraps arts and humanities into a package for the future. Ms. Taylor has served as the interim director for the Roundtable of Institutions of Color, housed at Robert F. Wagner School of Public Service. Karen also serves as a manager editor for Scholastic Books. And as a fundraising development professional, she has worked for the Bronx Museum of the Arts, the Feminist Press at CUNY, and the Brett Forum. While at the Feminist Press, she conceptualized and developed a fully funded educational program that used the press publication to develop curriculum for incarcerated women at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. In her free time, she's also an essayist and sometimes jazz vocalist. So we have a fantastic group of leaders here today. And with that being said, please join me in welcoming our panelists and moderator. I now turn the Zoom roof over to you, Brianna.
Thank you, Cami. And thank you guys. Thank you, Michael, Victor, and Monica, for being a part of this panel and doing the great work that you guys do. So with that being said, let's kind of launch into things. So this panel is about community members and community involvement. And so one of my first questions would be, just like as a general background for people attending, is what are community boards and what primary issues do they deal with? And just for like background context, community boards were created in the 1950s as an effort to decentralize the government, and that there's 59 community boards in New York City, and they have a limit of 50 members, and all these members are volunteers on salaried positions, and you guys advise local politicians and government agencies on issues affecting your district and how to spend the budget. So if you guys want to talk more about that, Michael, Victor, and Monica.
I will say, if you don't mind, very quickly, and I'm pretty sure that Victor and Monica can speak extensively about this, but when you really think about it, it's the first level of government, right? You have the people, and then you have the first level of government that really involves the community. And typically a community board is appointed by the borough president. They represent 50 members from the community. Typically those 50 members have some interest in the community, whether they live there, they work there, or they're students there. All can be members of the community board. And therefore, it's presupposed that they have a knowledge and interest in what happens in the community. Typically, although not always, the community board should be reflective of the community it represents. I would say that in Community District 9, many council members and the borough president tries as much as they can to do that, but sometimes doesn't really quite achieve that. But we are making strides in that. I think our current chair has gotten a system to be able to translate the proceedings in the Spanish language. Of course, as you know, all Harlems, East, Central, and West, is a very diverse neighborhood in Upper Manhattan, set of neighborhoods in Upper Manhattan, and a big chunk of that are Latinos, Spanish-speaking members of our community. One of the peoples that make up the very, very diverse nature of all Harlems and Upper Manhattan. And I think that our chair is working very hard in order to make the Spanish language members of our community participate in panel discussions such as this. It would have been nice that we had some sort of interpreter or translator for this, so that those members of our community can participate here with us. But by and large, on a very basic and fundamental level, that's what the community board is. There are very specific legal things it's supposed to do, and I'm sure Victor can speak to that.
Thank you, Mike. I think Mike covered quite a bit of it. When I think of the community board, I think of, as Michael said, the bottom rung of government. What I'd like to think is we are the eyes and ears of what goes on in the community. You know, as I walk the streets and drive, I take very notice of what's going on and kind of report that back to the various committees, whether it be police activities or something in the park. So we definitely are that. We also try to monitor city services that come into our community and make recommendations where that might be lacking and needs improvement. And we interface with a lot of the local elected officials, be it city council members, state senators, borough president, and make recommendations as well. And listen, you know, as I walk the streets, I listen to people, what they're saying, try to get feedback. You know, our board meetings are open to the public. Our committee meetings are open to the public to make sure we hear exactly what's going on. And as Michael said, we have a large Spanish-speaking population, so we have translation now, so we can hear exactly what's going on. People don't feel left out, and that their voice matters. And especially on the education side, we have a youth education libraries committee that's very active of what's going on and make sure we get our fair share of funds that come into the state along those lines. And as far as placement of municipal services and land use is very big in New York right now. So we have pushed back recently on some large developments going up that we don't think fits the landscape of the community. And we've let our voices be heard about that. And most often these large buildings are not affordable to people in the community. They're for other people outside of the community. So we're looking to make sure our voices are heard along those lines as well. Okay, thank you.
So Michael mentioned the borough president appointing some community board members. The city council person also appoints a 25-member portion of the community board. So we would hope that some of the members in our community who aren't necessarily organization people or people who get involved at that level will join. But the reality is there's a lot of politics going on in the community board. So there's a portion of people who just apply. There's an application process, but there's also a portion of people who are politically active and are technically political appointees. So there's that aspect too. I think one of the difficulties in the community board, getting people to join the community board, is to get the people who are really grassroots, the people that don't go to meetings and aren't going to call CCRB to complain about the cops and aren't going to call 311 to complain about the cops and aren't going to protest a methadone clinic coming into the community. You know, these are people that are grassroots. they've got their ear to the ground. They're not going by what somebody tells them. They're going by what they see or what their neighbor tells them about or what they're witnessing or how they have to help somebody fill out paperwork to try to get some kind of aid. So, but my ideal community board would be someone who is maybe not so politically active, maybe, you know, doesn't really understand the process, but somebody who absolutely understands what's happening to not the faux bourgeois or the gentrifiers, but, you know, just the people that have lived here in Harlem forever and don't have access to anything. So, you know, there is that aspect of the community board, but we are able to address issues. We can actually we're guided by a city charter. We can actually do investigations and have public hearings. So community boards can be very active in moving the needle to address the lost, the least, and the left out.
Thank you so much. And I mean, that's amazing. And that's the purpose of this panel, is to get people, to make people more aware about community boards and the amazing work that you guys do. So touching upon that, can you please tell people what are the committees that you guys belong to and what specific issues they focus on, so that people can know what to look forward to or if they want to apply to be on any of these committees?
You can be, even if you're not a community board member, you can actually apply to be a public member of a committee. Every community board has different committees. We have a health and environment committee. There are other community boards that have a climate change committee. I know one that has a climate change committee. We can do a ton. There's a broad leeway to have different committees, but you know, if you're not a member of the community board, you can be a public member of the committee. You're an active participant. We look for your guidance and your information just like we do everyone else. And that's an application process that people can complete through your local community board. You can call them and say, hey, I would like to be a public member of whatever committee, because all of the community boards in New York City have websites. You can check the website. It'll give you the name of the committee. Maybe you go to the meeting one time, you say, hey, I'd really like to become an active participant. You can reach out to the executive director of the community board and you can become a public member. And we need people to join. We need people to come. You know, the loudest voice, the biggest mouth is sometimes the person that gets everything. But the reality is what that person is getting may not be the best thing for the community. So we need everyone's interest. You know, a community has divergent interests, and we need for people to become active participants. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the outreach to really get the real grassroots people in, and some of the people that are in the community, and that would be my goal. But I want people to become involved, because if you don't, then certain folks with certain interests take it over, and some of the things that are going on in our community really don't get addressed at the rate that they should be addressed.
And I'll just like echo off that point. That's how I got involved with you guys, and how I met Victor was my senior year, you know, writing my thesis. I looked up community boards because I saw you guys created the 197A plan. I wanted to know more straight from the horse's mouth. So I went to one meeting and now it's snowballed into this, you know, this long-term relationship and investment in you guys and your community and all the great things that you guys are doing. So I definitely want to echo that's really easy to get involved. It's not that hard. Just show up to a meeting or email. Michael and Victor, do you guys want to mention the?
Sure. I currently chair for the last 6 years the Strategic Planning Committee. That committee was formulated by one of our prior chairs to specifically look at the community benefits agreement between West Harlem and Columbia University. So I have over the years, monitored it, tried to do more outreach so people know what the amenities are that are provided by Columbia. And in the last 3 years, under the former chair, Padmore John, we started looking at incarceration, recidivism, and how that's affecting our community. And I partnered with several groups in the area to take a look at that. I actually sit on the West Harlem Reentry Restoration Board as well, which is a part of Osborne, the Osborne Group, and just trying to see where we can help. Back in 2014, I believe, we had a large arrest at Manhattanville and Grant houses. So a lot of those people are starting to come out of incarceration, but coming out to what? And what skills did they learn in prison and being incarcerated? The answer to that is none. It's something they could use. So they will come out and want to come back to what they were doing, their territory, so to speak. So through Osborne and several other organizations, we try to provide housing, try to provide skills. If they want to get the GED or return to school, try to provide that. So that has been a focus for the last 3 years, trying to take a look at that. These are community members that are coming back and need some type of help. NYCHA, who I worked for, as mentioned before, for 30 years, had a policy where they prohibited people coming out of incarceration to re-enter the families that were still living there. They did a pilot program over the last 2 years to try to reverse that. And so far that has been somewhat successful. So some of those people, depending on the crime, can re-enter the family's housing where they were living before. So that's a success to some extent. This year, I want to get back in the community benefits agreement. I know we're going to talk about that a little more further on, but that is a vital part of what I'm looking at, along with housing and some other issues. Thank you.
Thanks. So I think we are gonna switch gears a little bit and talk to Karen, who is the founder of While We Are Still Here, a nonprofit organization that focuses on the preservation of the rich history of Harlem, and specifically 409 and 555 Edgecombe Avenue, the buildings there. Karen, could you talk to us more about your organization's project and any current goals that they have right now?
Okay, While We Are Still Here was founded in 2015. It was primarily organized around the history of 409 and 555 Edgecombe Avenue, two of the many important quote unquote buildings in Harlem. 555 Edgecombe, where I live, was home to Paul Robeson and Canada Lee and Joe Lewis and Kenneth and Mamie Clark and Count Basie. I mean, the list goes on. And at 409 Edgecombe Avenue, Thurgood Marshall lived there, James Weldon Johnson lived there. As a matter of fact, the entire early Black leadership of the NAACP lived at 409 Edgecombe Avenue. And so essentially, we were founded to begin the process of codifying various aspects of Harlem's history that is kind of not very well known. And, you know, to that end, we've offered arts and humanities programming. We've had panel discussions around, you know, civil rights history down at 409 Edgecombe. We hold the Sugar Hill Music Festival every year as an outreach event to bring people, to raise people's awareness of the fact that we exist. We've done various kinds of programming with the Schomburg and with Teachers College, the Harlem Educational History Project. We've partnered with them around the Modern School, which was the first Black independent school in Harlem, founded by Mildred Johnson. One of the things that is on the calendar for spring of 2022 is the unveiling of the markers that we will be putting around Harlem. We got a grant to install 25 markers at various historical spots in Harlem, and we'll unfold them over a 2-year process. 13 the first year, 12 the second year. We've got everything on there from the funeral site of Malcolm X on 149th Street and Amsterdam Avenue to the final home of J. Rosamond Johnson, who was the composer of Lift Every Voice and Sing. We have on 155th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, there's a senior building there that Queen Mother Moore lived in. She was an early advocate for reparations during the 1950s. She kind of started the call for reparations, and many people thought that she was crazy, but as it turns out, you know, there's more awareness around the reality of what that could look like. And, you know, While We Are Still Here was founded in kind of like this panic, or I guess it's like kind of this state of emergency because of the population changes. So many aspects of Harlem's history will just be kind of, you know, like glossed over and completely forgotten. And while we are still here, we intend to ensure that, you know, various aspects, that people can get a taste of Harlem's history and, you know, not just focused on the Harlem Renaissance, not just focused on, you know, so-called poverty and drug addiction and that kind of thing that Harlem is kind of known for, but for all the various other very positive aspects of, you know, what the people of this community brought to New York City and essentially to the world. And when I think of so-called gentrification, I really think it's a symptom of the larger lingering problem of racism and how it affects every single aspect of life from the largest to the smallest. And I think that Undesign the Redline does an excellent job of graphically laying out that history. And so basically for Black people in this country, you know, since the end of chattel slavery, we've been always plagued by the issue of where we are going to live because of the, you know, nature of segregation and what do you call those things? The restrictive housing covenants. So, you know, once we were freed from enslavement, we set out on our own, you know, and we went wherever we could go to find a place to live, whether it was up in the mountains or down in the swamps. You know, we created these little towns away from white people. And when the white people decided that they could not tolerate our presence wherever it was that we were run off and, you know, killed or mutilated. And so we had to go find other places to live that grew into these communities before the next racist conflagration ran us away again. So when we see the issue of population change that's happening in Harlem and Bedford-Stuyvesant and North Philly and Oakland, California, and in the Bronx be next, what we're seeing is an outgrowth of these conflagrations that we've experienced over the history of our presence in this country. And, you know, so the incoming white people don't come with like torches and, you know, nooses and guns, but they will weaponize the police in their favor.
Yes.
So, you know, that's what happens there. And I mean, I'd also, like, I've been thinking about the whole concept of displacement. And when I think of like white working class and middle class white people moving into, you know, these various neighborhoods that at a certain point, I mean, they're marginal in that sometimes they're not all that safe, but because, you know, these working class and middle class white people cannot afford to stay in their previous neighborhoods, they too are being displaced from their neighborhoods, but they have not done a good job of advocating for the kinds of societal changes that would make it difficult to displace people from, where their families have been for decades and decades. And a neighborhood like Park Slope comes to mind with me. So, I'm really thinking about how, as annoying as I find, this so-called gentrification and the displacement of people of color, I also find it curious that white people are allowing themselves to be displaced from where they previously lived, to move into these neighborhoods. It's a very interesting kind of dynamic.
And that's a really great point for you to bring up, that gentrification is, as it is a race problem, it's mostly a class issue. And because in America, class and race are so closely intertwined, it's difficult for people to understand that concept because it's a class issue. And so kind of going off of that point, so do you believe, how do you guys feel about if there is a relationship between, kind of hinted on it already, a relationship between the historic redlining and the neighborhood health of Harlem today?
I think there's a direct correlation, where we live here in CB9, if you look, we have 2 bus depots right within CB9. We have the sewage treatment plant that was protested against. It should have been down in the 90s, but their voices were stronger at the time, so they pushed that sewage treatment plant up here. I think Peggy Shepard spoke about that last evening. We have a major highway that runs on the west side of Harlem and one that runs on the east side. And I think that has affected this area quite a bit. The asthma rate in Harlem is very high. I know some of the buses are starting to go hybrid and electric, but some of the damage is already done. You can walk from the bus depot on 12th Avenue and 133rd Street to the bus depot on Amsterdam and 120 something Street. That's just very close. If you go farther east, there's another bus depot over by Esplanade Garden that's been there for quite some time. It's no mistake that these things are in our communities. They're not in the 90s. They're not what they call the Upper West Side. They push them up to Harlem. The sewage treatment plant that I live 2 blocks from was fought tooth and nail, and it still ends up here. And lawsuits that transpose from that. When that treatment plant first went up, I could smell the odors every evening as things happened. They have since changed it. It's a little bit better. You can't smell it. That doesn't mean we're not being affected, but they wouldn't stand for it down there. And we were kind of pushed into these communities before, and now people want to kind of take them back. So I think there is a direct correlation to redlining to the health of our communities for sure.
And I would have to agree 100% with Victor. As a matter of fact, there is not only a correlation, it still exists. Redlining still exists. It's done in a very small, subtle way. It's a little bit more subtle, and it's done a lot behind the scenes. Politicians are involved in redlining now as much as the insurance companies used to be back when redlining was sort of a clearly racist way of denying a community the valuable resources that it needed. But now it's done in a very subtle way, and Victor just hit upon exactly that, is the sort of pushing of social services type of organizations and nonprofits and methadone clinics. And not that there's anything wrong with those things. They should get money and resources to address the issues that for which they were created. But to put them all in the red line box of a community and have people who to avail themselves of services come from all over the city into our neighborhood is in effect sort of modern day redlining. And this happens not only, some call it medical redlining, right? But it happens in almost across the board in almost every aspect of social services that you can possibly think of, where these organizations are providing services not for people in the community. They're providing them for the greater New York City and have all those folks come into our community. And so that still happens today. And that is one of the major issues that we deal with at the community board. As a matter of fact, about 8 or 9 years ago, a community board put out a resolution. Again, this is some of the things that a community board does, is we put out resolutions where we declaratively state we do not want any more social service organizations in West Harlem. We're super saturated with these organizations. And we're super saturated with people coming into the neighborhood to avail themselves of these services. And that brings problems. And it certainly have brought very acute problems during the pandemic, for which we're still having to deal with it right now as we speak.
I see a comment in the chat I just wanted to speak on. That was from Christina. As Michael was speaking about the drug treatment centers, she said, like on 125th. Now, I often travel 125th in Lexington, and I often call it like the night of the living dead. I've gone over there to the DMV, and people, I mean, strung out, nodding, like the 60s. You know, I was here in New York in the 60s when heroin was big, and Lexington Avenue looked like that. Now, they're getting ready to gentrify and build a huge building over there. Some of those people are being pushed towards Malcolm X Boulevard, Adam Clayton Powell, 125th, right in front of the Whole Foods, in front of the Red Rooster. If you go in that area, you'll see those same people now over here because they have a police bus on Lexington and 125th that has kind of intimidated those people. And the drug treatment centers that are over by the Lexington Avenue, 125th area is out of control. And as Michael said, a lot of the people being serviced there don't come from our community. Some do. I mean, we have issues need to be addressed, but you have people coming from Queens and Staten Island and from the Bronx to be serviced here. The saturation is just out of control and it affects our neighborhood. Right here, 145th, between Broadway and Amsterdam, it's a drug treatment center that was using, I forgot which substance, but now they wanted to transfer it to methadone. What will that do to the community? Next door to that drug treatment center on the left is a library. On the right is the Boys and Girls Club. How do we protect the young people as they come and go from those facilities of people being treated? You know, they often hang around afterwards. Drug dealers prey on these people that are trying to recover. How will that affect the community? It's just, you know, spread it out. Let it be where people live as well. We have issues, but so do other communities.
So those are amazing points. And I just wanted to put this graph up that's from patch.com that talks about in the past decade being able, I think these statistics are for East, Central, and West Harlem. All these demographics and all of the rate of change in the patterns of the racial makeup are almost evenly distributed across each section of Harlem. So you can see like from 2010 to 2020 how the Black population declined. During this time period, the Harlem's Black population declined by 10,000 people. Meanwhile, the white population increased by 18,000. And that was a rate of increase for the entire neighborhood. It went from 306,000 people in 2010 to 326,000 people to 2020 at a rate of increase at 6.6%. So that's just adding statistics to all of the things that you guys are saying, just giving a face a number. And just going off of everything that was just said, if we look at COVID-19, and so if you look at, like, one of our questions is, how do you think COVID-19 will impact the housing market in long term? And what are some pandemic consequences you've already begun noticing changing the landscape of Harlem? And so if you look at this graph, if anyone's been to the Undesign exhibit, these same areas that have the highest eviction rates, the highest number of people, the highest COVID death rates, and the lowest median income neighborhoods, those are the same areas that were redlined in the 50s and the 60s. So you just see this this intersection of these same neighborhoods being constantly impacted and facing the brunt of all these social ills and pandemics and medical issues over and over and over again. And so I just wanted to put that up.
I don't think we
Oh,
forget, like in connection with redlining, there were all of these fires that happened in Harlem and
yeah.
South Bronx.
In the Bronx, yeah.
And so many of these, neighborhoods that are being, where you're getting this population change, between the fires and the redlining, it kind of set up the reality that we're dealing with now. There's a great book, a study by Deborah and Roderick Wallace. It's called The Plague on Your Houses: How New York Was Burned Down and National Public Health Crumbled. And essentially, I'll just read like a sentence or two what they said. The fire service cuts in Harlem, in parts of Brooklyn, Brownsville, and the South Bronx triggered an epidemic of building fires and heated up a related epidemic of building abandonment. The author said they submitted a grant proposal to the NIH to assess the public health outcomes of the massive destruction of housing in New York's poor neighborhood, but the NIH did not even review their proposal. So for 15 years, they self-funded this research plan that resulted in this really very detailed book, an analysis of what the policy of planned shrinkage did to Harlem and places like it in New York City.
I think we have to deal with not only that reality, but we have to deal with the reality that many of our politicians were willing to allow builders in New York City to build affordable housing in the Bronx, while they were able to upbuild on the West Side and the East Side. And so as a result, we have many affordable housing units that are in areas that no one can afford. I mean, if you're making $35,000 a year, you can't afford to pay $1,500 a month for a 1-bedroom, even in the South Bronx. And we have to keep something in mind. The South Bronx is the poorest congressional district in the country. And, I looked at the census numbers on Manhattanville and Grant. We're close behind. And this zip code sends more people upstate to prison than any other zip code in the state. So everything is perfectly situated. We have affordable housing. We have very poor health care. I don't know what the density is in West Harlem, but I work in the Bronx, and in the 40th precinct, it's the most densely packed precinct in the city. And someone told me that the numbers rank nationally for people packed together in one location. And I don't know what it looks like for Harlem, but there has been a perfect storm of politicians allowing builders to manipulate the programs and build housing that the regular folk, people who have lived in Harlem for generations can't afford it. People who lived in the South, that grew up in the South Bronx, can't afford it. And so, here we are. And I mean, there's a building down the street from me. I work on 165th Street. Literally, that building is essentially upper class, middle class white kids on 165th Street in the South Bronx. And some builder built it, but it's not for the community. And there's a new development going up right across the river in the Bronx. Yep. And those are $1 million apartments. They are not for the community.
Absolutely.
And we have to deal with that. you know, and that was approved by the community board. But the people that live in the projects that sit on the river, 138th Street in St. Anne's, 138th Street in Morris, that's, you know, that's not for us. So the reality is we haven't necessarily used the tools that we have so that our community can be put in a better position. Now with the housing in the Bronx, you know, I did not know this, but I had a client who worked on rebuilding the Bronx. So who was active in that? The Catholic Church was active. That's why if you see the buildings that were built on the properties that on the land where the buildings were burnt down, those are affordable housing. Generally, they're in a land trust. They have community people who work in it, who live in it. They did not have other people moving into their neighborhood to take advantage of that housing. Those were South Bronx natives.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it was the people that got involved. The father who was most active, he used all his power to build for the community. But right now, people aren't building for the community. I think about churches who are selling property. They're not building affordable housing. Am I wrong? They're not building, they're building luxury housing.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, Grace Church on 139th, that builder is building luxury housing on that block.
I just wish we had so much more time to talk. I had so many wonderful questions, and I just also want to leave some questions at the end from the chat, because there is a lot of questions coming in. But before we do the Q&A, I do want to ask you guys this one final question. I know we did not get to touch upon everything that we wanted to, and hopefully we will have another talk where we will be able to talk upon those other issues. Like we didn't even touch upon Columbia and the community benefits agreement as deeply as I wanted to, and all these other interesting topics. Is just, we could talk about this for hours. But before we do the Q&A, I did want to ask you guys, so what do you think the city needs to implement long-term housing programs or housing initiatives to help address this affordable housing crisis? And in the next year, is there any like how can attendees and myself help you guys achieve any of the goals you guys have set in the short term, for example, the next year?
I will say just very briefly and very quickly, because I know we're pressed for time, and I really do. Everyone's been speaking so eloquently about our particular area. But in my mind, the best way to address the affordable housing issue is to build affordable housing, and to build affordable housing, not non-affordable affordable housing. And that has to be done with city partnership with many types of organizations and the community. You have to build it. There's just no way around it. There's just no, I really don't see any clear way. You cannot take away property that belongs to other people to address affordable housing issue. For example, you cannot take away the private homes of HDFC co-ops and cooperatives. They are homeowners, and they're doing everything, believe me, they're doing everything they can to keep their buildings and houses and homes affordable. And whereas the city should stop and move away from trying to regulate HDFCs, they really just should go out and build affordable housing.
I think another thing is like the definition of what affordable housing income restrictions are. That whole thing around area median income needs to be completely thrown out. There's got to be a new criteria around, you know, what true affordability is.
Absolutely.
But, you know, it's just ridiculous.
That's a good point, Karen, because the area median income here often takes in Westchester and people further down in Manhattan. That's not reflective. Right, it's not reflective of what we have here. But to follow up on Michael's point, strengthening HDFC so those aren't turned over to other people, and building true affordable housing for people that live here. You know, city workers can't afford a lot of the places that are being built today. We need that to strengthen. Also, proper legal representation so people aren't evicted from their homes that they do have, and people made aware of their rights. And one last thing, we at the board, we deal with NYCHA quite a bit. NYCHA has this whole privatization plan that I've been looking at extensively. I was a NYCHA director. I don't understand it totally myself. So I can imagine the residents, do they know what a land trust is? Do they know a private partnership is? They're going to be going to Section 8. The Section 8 rules are much tougher than public housing, which is Section 9. Do they know that? That's one thing we're trying to educate them on before they agree to this. You can look at all the fluff, the new exterior they're doing and giving you a new refrigerator and stove, but what does it mean when you can't afford to pay your rent? Will they reduce your rent if you're unemployed like NYCHA does right now? Those are the things that we need to take a look at. So sometimes they call NYCHA, the last affordable housing around. We need to keep that. A lot of people have come through there and done well. We need to hold on to that and keep it affordable and not make it private. And press the federal government to do the proper funding so it doesn't have to go private. That would really help.
Great. So now I'm just gonna read off a couple questions before we run out of time. So one of the questions is from Christina Chase. How do we hold universities responsible for contributing in / being complicit in these changes? I cannot help but wonder if those new people on 165th are college students.
We have to hold them. We have to get our politicians to hold them accountable. I'll give you, for instance, I have a ton of relatives who live and work in Greensboro, North Carolina, where North Carolina A&T is an integral part of the community. They never have to beg them to do anything. They don't have to worry about them charging some secret account for the hours or the time or the money that's spent doing a project. They have worked on education issues, housing issues, community development issues. They have been a stalwart member of the community and no one ever had to beg. So how do we get Columbia, yes, Columbia, to step up and have that kind of relationship with the community as opposed to it being us versus them? So that means that Columbia has to come to our community with transparency and a willingness to address the housing issues that they've contributed to. Honestly.
Monica hit the point, so well, and I wish we had time to talk about the community benefits agreement because I have a list of things there, but it goes back to elected officials. The land that was stolen, and I do say stolen by Columbia to build their new campus, they evicted people and businesses from that area. And that just led to a trickled up effect, so to speak, of other people moving into the community. How we hold them responsible, I think it has to be the elected officials. Some of the things they have done in the community benefits agreement is only a benefit to Columbia.
Columbia.
It really is. I mean, they need to be held accountable. And if that means embarrassing them, I've met with some of their administrators and all I get is, that's what the community benefits agreement says. Well, as a lawyer told me a long time ago, whoever has the best lawyer wins the case. And when this benefits agreement was put together, they had the better lawyers. And some of our elected officials went along with it because initially it was denied. When it was appealed and some support from some local officials that I won't name at this time, then it went forward.
Exactly.
And 13 acres of this area was taken away. And where are those people now? They're gone. And that trickled to other people coming into the community and we losing housing. So
I would also say, and this maybe brings it back full circle, is that, people, corporations behave badly when they believe no one's watching, no one's looking.
Exactly.
And one of the things that we can do, and Brianna, you certainly started with respect to this issue, you bring a light to what's really happening in the community. And I encourage other Columbia University students, Barnard students, certainly we try to do it, members in the community. We have had long, many members of our community had no problems putting a spotlight on some of the insidious actions of Columbia University on some of these issues, not all issues, but certainly on some of these issues, calling them to task. And I think that's one of the best things that the people can do in the community, and certainly students, and Brianna, you certainly started it, is putting a spotlight on their actions. And it really is on some of the hypocrisy that university spews out. You know, they profess to be everything good, or at least they teach what they teach in the undergraduate level and the graduate level studies one thing, but they behave like really bad corporations on the other hand. So the newspapers, the students, certainly Brianna, the work that you do, and certainly the work that we do in the community. You know, Columbia is, you know, a rather large influence in our community, and to tell you the truth, they can do almost anything they want to do. And
Exactly.
They can buy off anybody they want to buy off.
Yep.
And they can enlist the community to work for them and spew the you know, drink the Kool-Aid, so to speak. But the one thing that we can do, and the one thing that I believe, Brianna, you started, and maybe the other students can pick up, is always speak the truth about what's happening, document it, put it out there so that others can see, so that the future generations can see what really happened here in, say, 2020 and 2021.
Thank you so much. And that's just a powerful note to end on. And I want to say that I'm so inspired by all of you guys and the work that you do. And I'm so thankful to know you guys and have gotten the pleasure to work with you and, you know, bring you in to the symposium and talk to you guys. That's the purpose of this, was to talk about the power and the purpose of oral storytelling and of oral traditions. And I want to continue this conversation. I think there's definitely going to be another panel because we did not touch upon half of the things that we had planned to touch upon today. And I just want to say also that this issue is not unique to Harlem. This issue is happening all across the country. Gentrification is not in a vacuum or in an isolated bubble. This is happening in Chicago, where I'm from, which got me interested. This is happening in California. It's happening in Miami. These are happening to majority Black and brown neighborhoods. And gentrification is becoming more of a hot topic issue, especially with COVID-19 and the eviction moratoriums. And, you know, it has really exposed how deeply flawed our housing system is and cannot sustain us anymore. And that there needs to be work done, and that housing should be a human right, and that it should not be considered a luxury. Everyone should, at the end of the day, have a roof over their head. And I wholeheartedly believe this, and so do the members on this panel. And I just want to say thank you all for tuning in. Please get involved, write their names down. They're all on Community Board 9. Karen with her While We Are Still Here, that amazing organization. Please reach out, join the conversation. I hope that you continue to talk about this outside of this panel, and hopefully take action. It's really simple, as much as showing up to a meeting and you don't know where it'll take you. And this is where I am now, just after attending one meeting randomly my senior year. Thank you all so much, and stay tuned for hopefully a part 2.
Thank you, Brianna.
Okay, thank you
Brianna.
so much for the
Bye-bye.
opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Brianna.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Have a great day,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you so much, Brianna. Thank you for putting together the panel. Micah, Monica, Karen, Victor, thank you so much for your expertise and for sharing your knowledge with us. This is a wonderful way to end our symposium. You were our final panel, and I love this rousing call to action as a way to send us forward into the weekend. I'm just going to give some closing remarks. here today. So after the previous 2 days have been sort of rich and very, very full, we've examined far-reaching effects and active legacies of redlining across all sectors of public life in the perpetuation of unequal education, uneven development in housing, digital infrastructure, and the planning and predatory algorithms that are created, and environmental injustice. Over the course of our many panels, we've had a wonderful opportunity to learn from artists and from artists engaging with these topics currently, and from artwork from the past. We had a wonderful zine panel that was sort of doing close reading of many of the archival zines from our zine library. We've heard from student researchers, journalists, scholars, and practitioners. At last evening's keynote, Peggy Shepard recounted, after her years of working with communities to address environmental justice and to promote climate justice, all of the ways in which everyone should engage, that doing nothing is not an option. She called for a symphony of allies to engage in the struggles to address climate justice going forward. Today, we've learned about the brave work of communities that are across the country fighting to redress historical and ongoing oppression of African American and African descendant residents in places, in cities and neighborhoods where they live. And again, student researchers were essential to this process. And just now we heard from resident leaders at the hyperlocal level working to address any number of ongoing struggles in the neighborhoods where we exist, and a call to action for all of us to engage in many ways. I hope that those of you who have been with us over the past couple of days have learned from all of the people who boldly shared their work with us. It would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge all of the many people that made this possible. First, I'd like to thank my partner in crime in all things Undesign, Miriam Neptune, for your vision and for your leadership on this entire project. I'd also like to special thanks for the planning, promotion, and contributing particularly to this program, calling people out by name: Simon Akhtar, Alana Altman, Zakia Collier, Jenny Correa, Avi Cummings, Maya Darville, Chris Dobbins, Caitlin Jinmei Falk, Jocelyn Urich, Jasmine Masso, Alicia Peaker, Pamela Phillips, Alex Pittman, Jennifer Rosales, Brianna Sturkey, Vanessa Till, and the full Undesign the Redline Planning Committee. And Barnard AV Services, the entire team, who without their help, we would have not had sort of all the technological capabilities that we have been able to enjoy to share with you on this platform. I also need to thank the Barnard Library and Academic Information Services, the Barnard Center for Research on Women, and the Barnard Engages Mellon Grant, the Digital Humanities Center, the Center for Engaged Pedagogy, the Barnard and Columbia Urban Studies Program, Instructional Media and Technology Services, the Vagelos Computational Science Center, and Humanities New York for their generous support of the program and our attendees. This will close out we will be posting recordings of these sessions on our website after some light video editing to edit out sort of the behind the scenes, and they will be available. Everyone who is registered will receive an email when they are available online. And we urge you to continue to engage with us. This project, Undesign the Redline at Barnard, continues through the academic year. On view, we have the exhibition in the Milstein Center. There's a variety of other programming that has already taken place and more to come. So we invite you to continue to engage with us over the coming weeks and months. And wish you all a wonderful weekend. And I think that's it for me. Miriam, did I miss anything?
Not at all. This was wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for repeating the call. We all have something that we can do, and knowing this history enables us to mobilize it in service of change. And we also ask you to come and visit the library. Because of COVID protocols, it's a little bit hard for us to have large groups, but I posted the tour information in the chat, and you can find it on our website, library.barnard.edu/undesign, and you can come in to see the exhibit. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care, everyone, and be well.